The teller slid the statement across the cool laminate of the counter. It was a single sheet of paper, folded in three. The woman on the other side did not move to take it. Her hands rested on the worn leather strap of her purse. The teller, a young woman with a bright, practiced smile, pushed it a little farther. It was a gesture meant to be helpful. It felt like a dismissal. The woman, Sarah Reed, finally reached out. Her hands were clean, but the knuckles were large, the skin mapped with a lifetime of work. She unfolded the paper. She already knew what it said. She had seen the first copy in the mail. This was just confirmation. Balance, $15. Service charge, $40. New balance, negative $25. The teller's smile remained fixed. She had been trained for this. She had a script. She said, "We can help you settle the negative balance today. We take cash, check, or a transfer from another account." Her voice was pleasant. It was the voice of institutional procedure. Sarah Reed looked up from the paper. Her eyes were clear. They were not angry. They were not confused. They were patient. She folded the paper with deliberate care, aligning the edges perfectly. She did not put it in her purse. She held it in her hand. "No," she said. The word was quiet. It was not a protest. It was a statement of fact. "That's not right." The teller's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She recovered. "I'm sorry?" Sarah looked past her at the nameplate on the polished wooden door behind the counter. "Mr. Harris, branch manager." "I need to speak with Mr. Harris," she said. The teller glanced back. "Mr. Harris is with a client." "I can wait," Sarah answered. She moved to the side, away from the teller window, and stood near a short line of potted plastic plants. She did not look at her phone. She did not check her watch. She simply stood, the folded paper held loosely in her hand. She was a picture of stillness in a place designed for transactions. A man in a suit behind her in line sighed impatiently. A young mother shifted a crying baby on her hip. The security guard by the door watched her for a moment, then looked away. She was not a threat. She was something else, something the room had not yet identified. After 10 minutes, the polished door opened. Mr. Harris was a man in his late 40s who wore the confidence of his position like a well-tailored suit. He smiled before he listened. He gestured Sarah toward his office with a smooth, practiced motion. "Please, come in. Susan said you had a question about an account." He did not wait for her answer. He walked behind his large desk, the wood gleaming under the recessed lighting. On the wall behind him was a framed mission statement, full of words like integrity and community and partnership. He sat, leaving her to take the smaller chair opposite him. He steepled his fingers. "Now, how can I help you?" Sarah placed the folded statement on the center of his desk. She did not speak. She let the paper speak for itself. He picked it up, glanced at it, and his smile became knowing. "Ah, yes, the dormant account maintenance fee." He set the paper down. "It's a bit of a surprise for some folks, I understand." He leaned forward, his tone shifting from manager to educator. "You see, when an account has a very low balance and no activity for a certain period, the state has a law that allows us to apply a service charge to cover the administrative costs of maintaining that account. It's standard practice." He leaned back, the lesson concluded. The implication was clear. It was the law. It was standard. The matter was settled. Sarah watched him. She noted the way he had not used her name. She noted the way he called her folks. She let the silence sit in the room for a moment. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. The stakes in the room felt laughably small. A $40 fee on a child savings account. A misunderstanding. But Sarah Reed was not here about $40. She was here about the period at the end of a sentence she had not yet been shown. The manager checked his watch. A subtle gesture, but a clear one. His time was valuable. Finally, she spoke. "What law?" she asked. He was ready for that one. He swiveled in his chair and pulled a binder from a credenza. He flipped to a tabbed section and turned the binder around for her to see. A photocopy of a statute. State Code 14, Section 8, Subsection B. He tapped the page. Enacted in 1981. It's been on the books for 40 years. It allows a financial institution to charge a reasonable fee against accounts that are presumed abandoned. He smiled again, a little tighter this time. It was the smile of a man who had just played a winning card. He believed the conversation was over. He had presented the evidence, the law itself. What argument could there be? He watched her, expecting her to nod, to sigh, to perhaps ask if the $25 negative balance could be forgiven. He had already decided he would magnanimously agree to that. It would be a gesture of goodwill. Sarah Reed looked at the page. She saw the date, 1981. She did not read the dense legal text. She did not need to. She had already done her homework. She simply nodded slowly. "I see," she said. She reached into her purse and took out a small, worn manila folder. The room went quiet. Some men collect problems. Her husband had collected patience, and he had taught her to do the same. To understand why Sarah Reed was not intimidated by the binder on the manager's desk, you have to go back 3 weeks, to her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Her granddaughter Lily sat across from her, carefully colouring in a book of horses. She was 7. The mail had just come. Among the circulars and a letter from her sister was a small white envelope from the county bank. It was addressed to Lily, care of Sarah Reed. Lily had received $15 from her uncle for her birthday, and Sarah had taken her to the bank to open her very first savings account. It was a formal occasion. They had dressed up. Lily had proudly signed her name on the signature card, her letters big and wobbly. Lily saw the envelope. "Is that from my bank?" she asked, her voice full of a child's sense of ownership. Sarah opened it. She read the single sheet inside. She read it again. Her expression did not change, but a stillness came over her. Lily, sensing the shift, put down her crayon. "What is it, Grandma?" Sarah folded the paper and put it in the pocket of her apron. "It's just a notice from the bank, sweetheart. Finish your picture." But later, after Lily's mother had picked her up, Sarah sat down at the table alone. She took the statement out and smoothed it flat. Deposit, $15. Interest accrued, 2 cents. Dormant account service charge, $40. Balance, minus $24.98. The words were absurd. Dormant? The account was 6 weeks old. Service charge? For what service? The charge was nearly 3 times the amount of money in the account. It was not just wrong, it was nonsensical. It felt like a line of code that had malfunctioned, a mistake. But banks did not like to admit mistakes. She knew that much. She went to the hall closet and pulled a small step stool. From the top shelf behind a stack of old blankets, she retrieved a grey metal box. It was not locked. It had not been opened in the 5 years since her husband John had passed away. She brought it to the kitchen table and lifted the lid. The hinges squeaked. The smell of old paper and dried ink filled the small room. Inside was John's world, curated and archived. Old tax returns filed by year, the deed to the house, the titles for his truck and tractor. And at the very bottom, a stack of old bank passbooks, bound with a thick rubber band that had gone brittle with age. John Reed had been a quiet man, a mechanic by trade, a farmer by necessity. He did not trust easy answers. He believed in torque specs, in measuring twice, in reading the manual. When they had bought their first piece of land back in 1972, he had spent a week at the county courthouse tracing the deed back to the original patent, just to be sure. When they opened their first savings account at this very same bank, he had sat in the lobby for an hour and read every single word of the account agreement. He had come home and explained it to her. He didn't trust institutions to remember the rules. He believed that was the job of the individual. His motto was simple: check the work. Not because you expect to find a flaw, but because it's the only way to be certain there isn't one. He had taught her how to balance a checkbook, how to read a contract, how to find the load-bearing walls in a conversation. He had given her not suspicion, but a habit of verification. She picked up the top passbook, their first joint account. The cover was faded blue. Inside, the first entry, dated June 11th, 1972, was for $50. She smiled. That had been a fortune to them then. She flipped through the pages, a history of their life written in deposits and withdrawals. A withdrawal for a down payment on a truck, a big deposit from the sale of a calf. Then, on a page near the back, from 1987, there was a stamp, a block of red ink slightly blurred. It was a notice. Pursuant to the passage of House Bill 1138, this institution's policies regarding dormant accounts have been amended. Please see a teller for details. John had drawn a neat box around it with a pencil. Beside it, in his small, precise handwriting, he had written, HB 1138 supersedes 1981 statute. No fees on accounts under $1,000. He had done the work. He had gone to see the teller. He had gotten the details. Sarah sat back in her chair. The sunlight had moved across the floor. The kitchen was quiet. The $40 charge on Lily's account was not a simple mistake. It was a systemic one. The bank was operating on a memory from 1981. They had posted the notice in 1987, as the law required, and then, it seemed, they had forgotten. The people had changed, the managers had changed, the software had been updated, but the old rule had been coded in, and the amendment had been missed. It was a ghost in their machine. For 34 years. She found the copy of the amendment he had apparently requested. It was in the folder, a crisp photocopy from the law library, stapled to a fact sheet from the State Banking Commission. John had highlighted a single sentence. This act shall apply to all deposit accounts, regardless of the date on which the account was opened. It was not about the $40. It was never about the $40. It was about the principle John had lived by. The truth has its own pace. You just had to be patient enough to walk with it. She gathered the old passbook and the photocopy of the law. She placed them in a clean manila folder. Then she went to the phone and called the bank and asked for an appointment with the manager. She said she had a question about her granddaughter's account. Back in the manager's office, the air was thick with his confidence. Mr. Harris pointed again to the 1981 law in his binder. So, you see, he said, his tone patient, our hands are tied. It's the law. Sarah Reed did not look at his binder. She looked at him. Then she slowly, deliberately, opened the manila folder she had placed on her lap. The crisp sound of the paper seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet office. She slid her old, faded blue passbook across his polished desk. It came to a stop next to his binder. The contrast was stark. His was new, official, corporate. Hers was old, personal, lived in. What's this? He asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. She opened the book for him, her finger resting on the red stamped notice from 1987. My husband and I opened this account in 1972, she said, her voice even and calm. In 1987, your bank notified us that the law had changed. You put this stamp in our book. My husband looked it up. The 1981 law you are showing me was amended. This fee has not been legal on an account of this size for 34 years. She paused, letting the words settle in the space between them. You just forgot. Mr. Harris stared at the small red stamp. He looked from the passbook to Sarah's face. The confidence was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, then dawning comprehension. He was a branch manager. He followed the rules he was given. The rules were in his binder. This old book, this stamp, was not in his binder. It was an anomaly, an unsanctioned piece of data. He cleared his throat. Well, this is very old. Policies change. I'm sure this was superseded by a more recent policy. He was guessing. He was trying to find solid ground, but the floor was shifting beneath him. Let me make a call, he said, already reaching for the phone. He punched in a number and put it on speaker. The room filled with the sound of a ringing phone, then a smooth, professional voice. This is Mark Chandler. Mark, it's David Harris at the county branch. I've got a customer here with a question about the dormant account fee. I have the statute in front of me, the 1981 code, but she's presenting some historical documentation that suggests an amendment. The voice on the phone was unruffled. Mark Chandler was a lawyer for the bank's regional office. He dealt with problems. This sounded like a very small one. Harris, I've handled this a dozen times. The 1981 law is solid. What's the documentation? It's an old passbook from the 70s. It has a stamp in it from 1987, referencing a House Bill 1138. A long pause from the speakerphone, then a soft chuckle. A passbook? Harris, we don't use passbooks anymore. That's anecdotal. The controlling documents are the official account agreements and the state code. The 1987 amendment, if I recall, only applied to accounts opened prior to its passage. It grandfathered them in. It wouldn't apply to a new account, like the one for this customer's granddaughter. It was a neat, clean argument. It dismissed Sarah's evidence without invalidating it, a clever legal maneuver. He had created a box and placed her neatly inside it. Sarah had been silent. Now she reached into her manila folder again. She pulled out the second document, the photocopy from the law library, the one John had stapled to the information sheet. She didn't slide it across the desk. She held it. She found the sentence he had highlighted. She read it aloud, her voice clear and steady. This act shall apply to all deposit accounts, regardless of the date on which the account was opened. The silence that followed was different. It was heavier. The voice of Mark Chandler, the attorney, came back, but the smoothness was gone. There was an edge to it. Ma'am, he said, addressing her for the first time, I appreciate your diligence, but this is a settled matter. The fee is automated. It's applied across the system. We can, as a gesture of goodwill, certainly refund the $40 for you and waive the negative balance. We can even add a little extra for your trouble. Let's say $100. All we need is for you to sign a simple form acknowledging the matter is resolved. It was the third argument. The first was the law. The second was legal theory. The third was money, each weaker than the last. He was no longer arguing. He was negotiating. He was trying to buy the problem and make it go away. Sarah looked at the speakerphone on the desk as if it were the man himself. She said nothing. Ma'am? Are you there? Yes, she said. I'm here. Is the offer acceptable? He asked. No, she replied. There was another pause. The branch manager, Harris, was now pale. He was watching a small contained fire that he had failed to extinguish now threatened to burn down the office. The lawyer spoke again, his voice strained. Then what is it you want? I just want to know if it was done right, Sarah said. It's a simple question. Was the fee charged correctly, according to the law? Yes or no? The lawyer was trapped. If he said yes, she had the text of the law that proved him wrong. If he said no, he admitted the bank had made a mistake. He tried to sidestep.
It's more complicated than a simple yes or no. Sarah cut him off. It was the first time she had interrupted anyone. No, it isn't, she said. There is a law. You either followed it or you did not. I think you did not. And I think you have been not following it for a very long time. The branch manager, Mr. Harris, finally spoke, his voice thin. Mark, maybe we should get compliance involved. He was waving a white flag. This was above his pay grade. The lawyer on the phone sighed. There was a sound of profound weariness. Fine, we will schedule a conference call. We will bring in a regulator from the Department of Financial Institutions. We will get a definitive ruling. But I will need you, Mom, to be present for that call. He said it like a threat. He believed the authority of a state regulator would finally intimidate her into silence. He did not understand that a neutral verifier was exactly what Sarah Reed wanted. It was what John had always taught her to seek, an honest measurement from a true line. The meeting was set for the following week. It was not in the branch manager's office. It was in a soulless conference room at the bank's regional headquarters an hour away. Sarah drove herself. The room was dominated by a long, dark wood table, polished to a mirror shine. Mr. Harris was there. The lawyer, Mark Chandler, was there in person this time. He was younger than he sounded on the phone, with a sharp suit and an anxious energy. There were two other people from the bank, a woman from compliance and a senior vice president. They all had leather-bound portfolios and pens. They nodded at Sarah when she entered, their smiles brief and professional. They were a team. She was alone. She took a seat at the far end of the table and placed her manila folder in front of her. She took out a small notebook and a pen. The call was made. The speakerphone crackled to life. A new voice entered the room, dry and without inflection. This is Peterson, Department of Financial Institutions. What's this about? Mark Chandler, the bank's attorney, leaned toward the phone. Mr. Peterson, thank you for your time. Mark Chandler, counsel for the bank. We have a customer query regarding the legality of a dormant account fee structure. We are confident in our position, but wanted to get your formal verification to settle the matter. Our position is that State Code 14, Section 8, subsection B, from 1981, gives us clear authority. The bank's team watched the speakerphone, waiting for their vindication. Sarah Reed watched a fly bump against the large window, trapped. There was a long silence from the phone. Not a pause for thought, but the sound of someone working. The faint rustle of papers. The soft clicking of a keyboard. It went on for nearly a minute. The bank's lawyer started to look uncomfortable. He glanced at his colleagues. The senior vice president tapped his pen on his notepad. Tap, tap, tap. Then Peterson's voice came back. It was flat, final. That statute was superseded by House Bill 1138 in the first legislative session of 1987. The fee structure you're describing, as applied to active accounts with balances under $1,000, has been statutorily prohibited for 34 years. He paused and then delivered the killing blow. This was clarified in a departmental bulletin sent to all state-chartered banks in April of 1987 and has been a part of the standard compliance audit ever since. Did you not update your software? The silence in the room was no longer just an absence of noise. It was a physical weight. It pressed down on the polished table, on the leather portfolios, on the tailored shoulders of the bank's team. Mark Chandler's face was ashen. The woman from compliance had her eyes closed. The senior vice president had stopped tapping his pen. They had been exposed. Not for a crime, but for something almost worse in their world. Incompetence. A deep, systemic, 34-year-old incompetence. Sarah Reed wrote a single line in her notebook. She underlined it. Then she closed the notebook and waited. The call with Peterson ended quickly after that. The bank lawyer, Chandler, stammered a thank you and hung up. He did not look at Sarah. He looked at his boss, the senior vice president. He began to speak in a low, urgent tone.
but the older man held up a hand, silencing him. The vice president then turned his full attention to Sarah Reed. His demeanor had changed entirely. The corporate warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, transactional focus. "Mrs. Reed," he said, using her name for the first time, "it seems there has been a significant oversight." He did not apologize. Institutions do not apologize. They identify oversights. "We would like to rectify the situation. Obviously, we will refund the $40 charged to your granddaughter's account, and for the trouble we have caused you, for your time, for your diligence, we are prepared to offer you a settlement." He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a check already written. "For $5,000. All we require is your signature on this non-disclosure agreement." Sarah looked at the check. She looked at the dense, multi-page document next to it. She did not touch either of them. The room was still. Everyone was watching her. They expected her to take the money. $5,000 was a lot of money for a $40 problem. It was the price they had put on her silence. She looked at the senior vice president. Her gaze was level. "How many?" she asked. "I'm sorry? How many other accounts?" she asked again, her voice still quiet, but now it carried the weight of the entire room. "How many people did you charge this fee to?" The lawyer, Chandler, started to speak. "That information is proprietary." Sarah ignored him. She kept her eyes on the vice president. "For 34 years, how many accounts each year? How many children like my granddaughter? How many elderly people on fixed incomes? How much money did you take that didn't belong to you?" The vice president's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, that is an internal matter. The $5,000 is a generous offer to resolve your specific complaint." "It's not my complaint," Sarah said. "Not anymore." She pushed the check and the agreement back across the table with the tip of her finger. "I don't want your money. I want you to give back theirs. All of it." That ended the negotiation. They had nothing left to offer her. She had refused their arguments, their legal theories, and now their money. She was not a plaintiff they could settle. She was a witness to their failure, and she would not be bought. The meeting was over. They told her they would be in touch. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "One more thing," she said to the branch manager, Mr. Harris, who had been silent for the last hour. "My granddaughter will need a new passbook with the correct starting balance. $15. The resolution, when it came, was quiet. There were no newspaper headlines. No television cameras. It happened in a series of letters and regulatory filings. The bank, faced with the undeniable evidence of a 34-year compliance failure, had no choice. They launched a full internal audit. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands of accounts, small fees, $5, $10, $40 at a time, adding up year after year. The software had just kept running the old code, a digital ghost making illegal withdrawals in the dark. The total liability, including the original fees and the legally mandated interest, was $3.6 million. A few weeks later, a package arrived at Sarah's house. It contained a stiff, formal letter from the bank's president, informing her that a full remediation plan was underway. It did not thank her. It did not apologize. It stated facts. Tucked inside the envelope was a brand new, crisp blue passbook, in the name of Lily Reed. The first entry was a deposit, dated on her birthday, for $15.00. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the same table where it had all begun. The same sunlight streamed through the window. She took the new passbook and the old one of John's and placed them side by side. She ran her finger over the stamped notice from 1987. John had checked the work. He had found the truth and recorded it, a small act of personal diligence. He had no idea that 34 years later, his quiet habit of verification would ripple forward, that his penciled note in a forgotten book would unwind a multi-million-dollar mistake and return money to thousands of people who never even knew it was missing. She looked out the window at the old oak tree in the yard. John had planted it the year they were married. "It's too close to the house," her father had said. "The roots will damage the foundation." John had just smiled. "Some things aren't for now," he had said. "Some things are planted for the next man." A car pulled into the driveway.
A few minutes later, Willie came bursting through the door, her pigtails flying. She ran to Sarah and gave her a hug.
"Did it come?" she asked, her eyes wide. Sarah smiled and slid the new passbook across the table. Lily picked it up reverently. She opened it and saw her name, her balance. She looked up at Sarah, her face serious. "You got my money back," she said. Sarah reached out and tucked a stray hair behind Lily's ear. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "It was always your money. They just forgot." Some people collect grievances, hoarding them like treasure. Sarah Reed collected receipts. She collected the quiet, verifiable facts of the matter. In a world of loud opinions and confident assumptions, she held on to the patient, humble truth. And in the end, that was the only thing that held any value. It was the only thing that was ever truly worth collecting. The story does not end at Sarah's kitchen table. Justice is a current, not a lake. It flows.
Miles away, in another state, a man named Frank Coleman unrolls a blueprint on the hood of his dusty Ford pickup. He is a welder, not a lawyer. The sun is hot on his neck. The blueprint is for a county bridge, built in 1962. A new corporation wants to build a pipeline, and they claim the right-of-way runs straight through his family's land, the land his father and grandfather worked. The corporation has deeds, lawyers, and certainty. Frank has a memory of his grandfather talking about a promise the county made, a promise about the road never being widened. So he is here, at the county archive, with a blueprint that smells of dust and time. He traces a faint line with his calloused finger. It's a surveyor's note in tiny, elegant script. A note about a 12-foot strip of land. A prescriptive right paid for in 1962 that was never extinguished on the master plat. An old promise waiting on a map. A new corporation is about to learn that the oldest lines are sometimes the strongest.
Stay with us.